Please join me in welcoming our commencement speaker, the 42nd President of the United States and our Professor-in-Chief, the Honorable William Jefferson Clinton.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, President Bobbitt. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for leading the university through what I think we'd all admit has been an interesting, somewhat perilous journey over the last several years. And sometimes I wonder, I hear people say things about college and a college education, and it reminds me of that old joke about, which is worse, ignorance or apathy? I don't know and I don't care. I do know and I do care, and I think it matters a lot that all of you have been given this opportunity. And I still think it's a good thing to know more. I spend an inordinate amount of time every day trying to figure out what in the wide world is going on and why do people think what they do and what we can do. I want to thank Dean Soto for what she said and for coming here and to congratulate her on what I hope will be the first of many commencement ceremonies for the Clinton School of Public Service. And I want to thank Cliff Gibson and the entire Board of Trustees, the faculty, the administration, and the staff for their dedication to the work of the Clinton School. And I congratulate the class of 2022. And I thank all the people that got you here, the educators, mentors, family members, and friends who've supported you along the way. And I'd also like to give a special shout out to the members of the class of 2020 who are here today. And finally getting a chance to walk across the stage and collect their degrees, which is proof positive that no matter how interesting and creative we got during the pandemic with all of our virtual interconnections, the real deal still counts for something. After 2 years of waiting, I will do my best not to stand between you and your diplomas too long. But I would like to say a couple of things about the purpose of this school and the purpose of those of you who are receiving degrees. When I decided to put my library here and was trying to decide exactly what else we wanted to do, I looked at all these really impressive schools of public policy. There was Princeton and the LBJ School in Texas, and all these people that I knew already had more money than I would ever raise for it. But I believed one thing very strongly based on a lifetime in politics. There's a lot of, what's the old joke? A lot has been said, a lot has been done, but more has been said than done. And I thought there ought to be a school where people actually had to do on-the-ground field work to learn more, to acquire more experience, but also to learn how to work with other people and turn their good intentions into private and into public change that would actually show that their good intentions were right. And I found that all the years I was in politics, there was always a lot of talk between the Republicans and the Democrats, the right and the left, that almost always surrounded two things. What are you going to do? And how much money are you going to spend on it? Whether you're cutting taxes or starting a new program. Almost nobody ever talked about whatever you propose to do and however much money you have or don't, how do you propose to do it so that you actually achieve the goal you have set out to do? And interestingly enough, if you start with that, what is the goal and how are we going to do it? It is much easier to avoid the horrible polarization that we have in our country today. That is, if you begin with the end in mind, then it's okay if somebody disagrees with you about how to get there because you can keep arguing it. And if you really want the end bad enough, and you'll make a deal. I always tell everybody, anyone who reads the constitutional history of the United States should realize that the subtitle of our Constitution should be, let's make a deal. And now, that's viewed as something very bad to do. Like you obviously don't agree or believe in anything if you would dare make a deal. But I think it means you believe in democracy and the possibility of free people working together and people recognizing nobody's right all the time. And if you work together, you can get something done. So that's why this is a school of public service, not a school of public policy. A few years ago, I went back to my undergraduate alma mater at Georgetown and gave a talk about public service. And then it blew up into three talks. But the idea was to talk about a life in public service. And I said, as far as I can see, if you want to be good at this, whether you're in business, whether you're in government, or whether you're working for a non-governmental group of some kind, you have to care about people. I mean, real people, where they live, what their hopes and dreams are. You have to care about purpose. That is, you should be trying to empower people to make the most of their own lives. And the third thing you have to do is then to care about policy, because that answers the how question. And finally, you have to care about politics, but I did not mean by that elected office necessarily. I meant politics is in everything that requires getting agreement from people who come from different places, have different experiences, and different interests. I learned that, Dr. Bobbitt, when I was on the faculty at the University of Arkansas Law School. There's a lot of politics in higher education. And I had to tippy-toe around at a lot of faculty meetings. But I still believe that. If you start with the people, if you have a clear purpose, if you're willing to debate the policy, then the politics can take care of itself. And so I asked you to think about that today, because we are in a time when more or less 2/3 of the people believe that. Not only in America, but around the world. And yet, it is not nearly as successful in many places as polarizing by demonizing the people who are against you and finding the person that's as far from you as possible and pretending everybody standing between you and them agrees with them, which is just not true. So I think all of you who have this degree will go out into the world, I hope, with a greater ability to navigate that. Because you can't ever take democracy for granted. There are no permanent victories, and never have been, in politics or in public policy. You're always learning new things, or the demography's always shifting, or somebody's doing something somewhere else which changes things. All the things we're living with today. So you have to decide what you believe. inclusive democracy, I think, works best. I think, first of all, there's more of a spiritual basis for it than exclusive democracy for people who have religious faith. If you look at the admonition of the Christian New Testament to love your neighbor as yourself, as the second most important commandment. If you look at the Old Testament and the Jewish Torah, he who turns aside a stranger might as well turn aside from the Most High God. If you look at the Quran, that Allah put different people on the earth, not that they might despise one another, but that they might know one another and learn from another. The Dhammapada of the Buddha says, you are not fully human unless you can feel the arrow piercing another's body as if it had pierced your own. Then I could go on and on. You either believe that or you don't. You either think our common humanity is more important than our interesting differences, or you don't. Then after that, the second most important question is, if that's true, should we live under the same set of rules? You believe that or you don't. The extreme manifestation of not living under the same set of rules is shown in the battle in Ukraine today, where Ukraine wants to be an independent, growing, if flawed, as they all are, we all are, democracy. And Russia, under Mr. Putin, wants to own them, loot them, and is willing to kill quite a few people to get the job done. The relevant fact for today is this, and I plead, I'll make full disclosure. I love Ukraine, but I love Russia. I went to Russia the first time when I was 22 years old. And no, I just turned 23. Ancient. I went to Ukraine as the president and talked them into giving up their nuclear weapons, the third biggest stash in the world, because Russia and the UK and the United States all signed an agreement promising we would protect their territorial integrity. And when Mr. Putin got there, he said, well, your friend Yeltsin signed that, but it was never ratified by our parliament. Therefore, it's not part of our constitutional mandate. I disagree with this policy. Keep in mind, they'd already gotten what they wanted. Ukraine had given up their nuclear weapons. Be like, how would you feel if you went into McDonald's tomorrow and you placed an order that cost $5 and the guy took the $5 and then said, you took $5 from the person who was here standing before me, and I've taken over, and I'm looking at you, and I think you need to go on a diet. I'm not giving you the food. Well, please give me my $5 back. I got the money. You need to understand that's what happened. That's why we're in this mess today. I doubt very seriously if Vladimir Putin would have been shelling hospitals and killing all the other innocent civilians if Ukraine hadn't done what at the time was plainly the right thing to do and given up all their nuclear weapons. So Putin lives in a world where there's one set of rules for him and his crowd and another set for everybody else. Almost all of us think we would like to live in a world like that, even if we can't bear to admit it. We do. Every one of you, at some point or another, looks in the mirror and says, well, I may not be perfect, but thank God I'm not him or her or somebody else. The greatest sinners are always the ones that have faults other than ours. We're all that way. It's just human nature. And a democracy is set up so that we all struggle, but try to live under the same set of rules. So I think it's really important to support Ukraine. But from your point of view, it's really important that however you choose to serve in the public, private, or non-governmental sector, you try to create a life good enough with enough shared prosperity and shared opportunities and shared responsibilities that we can knit together a community that will prevent war and stop people from dying too young and stop people from being thwarted in their legitimate aspirations and dreams. And when necessary, give people a hand up. That's really what public service is about. I always say at the beginning of every endeavor, you should agree before you enter the game how to keep score. There are some games that are by definition zero-sum games. That is, in order to win, somebody has to lose. That's why basketball games, we're in the NBA finals now, have overtimes. But not every game is a zero-sum game. And interestingly enough, given the way our brain works, we love contests. And we can easily be made to feel we've been treated unfairly in the past and victimized. So we tend to like zero-sum games in politics. But then when we get into governance, we like games that are positive sum, where we can all win. Governor Hutchinson is a Republican. He and I have fought some amazing battles together. That is, against each other. But I was thrilled when he wanted to increase technology education in Arkansas, and I've done what I could to support him. And there's 2 or 3 other things he's wanted to do, and he's in turn been supportive of a lot of what we try to do to stem the opioid crisis, involve the faith community in doing it. Nobody said we had to stop disagreeing, but in order to help anybody, it was better that we were together. But that doesn't work so well in elections these days, partly because the information system in which we live today is designed to keep us torn up and upset, so our eyes will stay glued to the screen or the television or whatever it is. And all of you have to fight that, because if you love these graduates and you want them to succeed in public service, they can't be torn from stem to stern every 30 minutes by whatever the last hot button is. And I think it's amazing the scope of agreement you can reach if you start with the end in mind, putting people first. So that's what I hope, because I think that right now we are living in a time of divisive nationalism. And it works like crazy in politics, but it doesn't work in real life. I mean, I never will forget when Mike Beebe was governor of Arkansas. He had a 70% approval rating, partly because Arkansas was one of the 2 states, the other being Kentucky, that it had the largest reduction in uninsured people in America. Kentucky was the other. Both states had Democratic governors. Both states had become deep red states. But they were so happy, people were, And I couldn't figure out, I come down here instead of read polls. I come down here and walk around, talk to people, call them on the phone. And I remember when one person said they really did like this program Bibi had gotten in, and it was so much better than Obamacare. And so then when you ask them where to find it on the internet, it was, of course, the Affordable Care Act, and that's what it was. But Bibi was smart enough to know he had to get Blue Cross to administer the Medicaid expansion because our political mind was in a divisive mood and couldn't imagine anything good would happen in Washington. And our practical mind, loving our families and friends, was in a giving mood. And if you, all of you, had been on the front line there working for some anti-opioid abuse group or working for some effort to help low-income working people sign up for health care, you'd have to navigate this. So the reason I'm saying this is after they left office, the governor of Kentucky and Bibi, then the most popular governors in the country were the Republican governors of Massachusetts and Maryland, two Democratic states, because they were fair to everybody and they worked together. So we actually do like it when people make things happen, but we won't vote for it very much. And that is the climate in which you enter. Dictatorships around the world trying to push people around. People are determined to stay forever, like Mr. Putin and President of China, Mr. Xi, putting the stability of the world at risk and treating real people like they were just pawns on a chessboard. And then in America, wanting to be faithful to our crowd, even if it puts our human mission at risk. So you, no matter how you do it, have to figure out a way to navigate those divides. And I've been thinking about it because in the last few weeks I have said goodbye to three of the finest public servants I ever knew. I was in Mississippi a couple of days ago for a long delayed memorial service for Governor William Winter and his wife, who died in their late 90s, but almost a year ago, and we couldn't have a service. He was my friend and we served together. But Bill Winter kept getting elected in Mississippi, even in the 50s and 60s when he was pro-civil rights. And he served on my race commission when I was president, and then he came home for the rest of his life and worked on racial reconciliation at Ole Miss. And he and his wife were great friends of Hillary's and mine, and really great people. He jogged till he was 85. And then before that, I spoke at Madeleine Albright's funeral. And you all know her story. A Czech immigrant driven out of her home twice by Hitler and Stalin. And she found her way here because her father was a professor at the University of Denver and she became Secretary of State. Then, right before she died, one of my closest friends, Dr. Paul Farmer, who was, I think, the most important public health doctor in the world, died with his boots on in the hospital at Butero we built in northeast Rwanda, embracing a 16-year-old girl suffering with cancer in the first cancer center in Central Africa. His father died at 49 of a heart attack. His father's sister died at 53. He inherited the bad heart gene. But he made a phenomenal difference in the world. grew up with 4 brothers and sisters in a bus they converted to be like a trailer because his dad was a traveling salesman. Had nothing, went to Duke, went to Harvard Medical School, then opened an AIDS clinic in Haiti. And the rest just took off. All of these people were normal people facing adversity when they were young in different ways and determined to make a difference. Farmer never ran for any office, but we worked on the recovery area in Haiti together. Madeline never ran for any office, but she was active in politics from her perspective and supported democracy all over the world. Bill Winter ran 3 times for governor, finally won, and then ran against Thad Cochran, who was a friend of his. And Senator Cochran beat him in '84, which was a good year for the GOP, and he never ran again. But from '84 till the day he died, he was still at his marbles and he was still fighting for racial justice and for a better future for his state. You can do this. There are no rules and there are no fixed outcomes. So you can only have fixed values. You either believe our common humanity is more important than our interesting differences, or you don't. You either believe that democracy should be more inclusive, as I think all scriptures indicate it should, or you don't. The binary path is easier. It's either good, bad, us and them. It's so easy. You just immediately figure out who's us and who's them, saddle up and fight. But the reason you need an education is to think and feel and test your thoughts and your feelings against the real lived experiences of other people. That's what I wish for you. So here's my final thought. I get asked all the time, who were your big influences as a kid in politics? And I always say Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, and Vernon Doakey. People say, who the heck is Vernon Doakey? I said, he was my 8th grade science teacher. I also remember my last class in 8th grade science, 63 years ago. And Mr. Doakey was an Arkansas public school teacher, which means he was very poorly paid. And he was a retired coach, and so a lot of them tried to stay on until they could get full retirement and teach something else. And frankly, a lot of them weren't very good. He was great. I had 2 coaches. One was my biology teacher, and the other was Vernon Doakey. They were both great. So we're in our last class, and Vernon Doakey, to put it charitably, was not a handsome man. He kept gaining weight when he got older, and he couldn't afford to buy new clothes, so he just kept pushing the outer limits there. He had poor eyesight, and there were no contact lenses back then, so he had Coke bottle glasses and a beak nose, which he accelerated or accentuated by smoking cheap cigars out of a plastic holder. So we get to the last day, and he said, kids, it won't be long till you won't remember a thing I taught in 8th grade science. Nothing. He said, if you don't remember anything else, you remember this. Every day I get up and I walk into my bathroom, throw water in my face, put my shaving cream on, shave my face, wipe it down. I look in that mirror and I say, Vernon, you're beautiful. And he said, remember that. Everybody wants to believe they're beautiful. If you remember that one thing, it will take you a long way. Vernon Doakey was beautiful to those of us who knew him. He was bright as a penny and wise. I hope you meet a lot of people like him in your field work. And remember that one lesson. We're just here for a little while. When Billy Graham was dying, someone asked him what the great lesson of his life was. He said it happened so fast. And he was almost 90 when they asked him. It happened so fast. Make it count. And everything that's been invested to this point will be richly rewarded. Thank you.